2020, the order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, 304 section 20. I am going to begin by asking our school committee members and our student reps if they have any announcements or comments to make. As I mentioned before we went live, Ted Delano is likely not going to be with us tonight, and Myra Diaz, our student rep, is also not going to be with us. So why don't we start with you, Suzanne?
I don't have any school comments. I just I do want to say that I had the opportunity to be in the high school for town meeting, and I just want to thank Mr. Roulette for all the hard work he puts into making that run smoothly, and to say that it was really nice to be in the school, and I was really impressed with the signage and with the chairs in the halls and how the cafeteria was set up. It was nice to see because I hadn't been in the high school yet. Just wanted to shout out to that staff there. That's it.
All right, John.
So just a brief comment, and before I jump in, I just want to second what Suzanne said about Joe Dulett and his team. Those guys do an awesome job. So just wanted to acknowledge that as well. I also watched town meeting for the last couple of nights, I think like a lot of us did. And I just thought it was worth noting that one of the articles that came up was a citizen petition for some funding to repair the elementary schools, which it didn't pass for a variety of reasons. But I thought that 109 people signed it. The parents, I thought, made what were very valid points, and it was clear that there was some frustration on their part. So I think as a school committee, we are likely to be part of those conversations going forward, and I think it's incumbent upon us to help address some of those concerns that were raised, even though they weren't successful. Like I said, I think they did raise some valid concerns. So thanks, Amy, for letting me voice that comment.
Sure. Karen?
Well, obviously, I don't think we can give Joe Dulett kudos enough, so I will pile on to that. And I will say that since I can see Dennis on here, that I would actually like to come and take a tour of the building if I can contact you and maybe set up a time when it's not like inconvenient for you, because I don't want to, bother anybody, but I would like to come and take a stroll around if that's okay. Awesome.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'll join you. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
All right, Tabitha, look at me, remembering not to forget you.
Hi, I just wanted to take this time to acknowledge that a lot of students and teachers have been feeling very stressed lately, and like with online school being new territory and hybrid and fully remote learning, students are trying really hard to keep up with the work, and teachers are trying really hard to be able to provide an education, even though it's different. And the pandemic obviously is stressful to everybody, And so I just wanted to make sure, as a reminder to check in on your friends and your loved ones and your colleagues, check in on their mental space and their mental health, and just show everyone that we all appreciate everyone's hard work during these times. And yeah.
Tabitha, I really appreciate that. It's in that vein, Superintendent, to you and your team. I know that this has been a particularly long week with two nights of town meeting and a third night on school committee, and so I know that you and many members of your staff, and I see Max here. Max was there. It's appreciated, especially in these times, which are so exhausting. To Tabitha's point, it's just sort of a nonstop treadmill. So I don't have anything in particular to say. So I'm going to turn it right over to the superintendent, because there's a lot to discuss tonight.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With your permission, I'd like to take the items out of order so that the students who are guests tonight don't have to sit through the superintendent's report and the facilities report. So I would first like to turn it over to Principal Kohat to recognize the National Merit Scholarship commended and semifinalist students. Mr. Kohat.
Thank you, Superintendent Angelakis. Thanks, everyone. It is my honor to recognize several students for academic achievement. I'll begin with our commended students for the National Merit Scholarship. These students have been named a commended student in the 2021 National Merit Scholarship Program. Approximately 34,000 commended students throughout the nation are being recognized for their exceptional academic promise. Although they will not continue in the 2021 competition for National Merit Scholarship Awards, commended students placed among the top 50,000 scorers of more than 1.5 million students who entered the 2021 competition by taking the PSAT. Our commended students are Rebecca Chase, Elizabeth Delia, Henna Domian, Nicholas Parsons, and Leah Stewart. We also have 2 semifinalists. These students are among approximately 16,000 semifinalists in the National Merit Scholarship Program. They have an opportunity to continue in the competition for some 7,600 National Merit Scholarships worth more than $30 million. Our semifinalist students are Doug Dwyer and Muriel Fulgham. Congratulations, the entire faculty and staff are proud of your hard work. Well done. And I have more. I also want to recognize 2 more students for exceptional achievement in French. SHS senior Paul Flacca and sophomore Lily Gordinas have both been honored by the American Association of Teachers of French for their exceptional performance in the Grand Concours National French Contest. Both Paul and Lily earned platinum awards, the contest's highest honor, meaning that they scored in the 99th percentile nationally. The SHS World Language Department and our entire faculty are extraordinarily proud of their achievements. Congratulations, everyone.
Wow, well done.
Congratulations. Celebrating you students is one of the highlights of all of our school committee meetings.
If any of the students feel comfortable, would you share with us what your plans are or hopeful plans are? I know it's very early and still a stressful time for you.
I'd be happy to share. Hello, everyone. I'm Douglas Dwyer, and I'm really honored to have been invited here tonight. For the past 3 years, I've been the captain of the SHS robotics team, and that's had, I think, a really big impact on me. I definitely want to go into a career in STEM. I hope when I go off to college to potentially pursue a research career in computer science or math or something physics related. So I've been applying to schools like MIT, Northeastern, that sort of thing. And I'm really excited to see where my journey takes me.
We're excited to follow your journey. Congratulations, nice job.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to jump in? No pressure. Anybody?
I can jump in too. Sorry.
I was going to ask Paul if you're planning on using your French, if you're going to go further with that.
So I'm Paul Flacca for the record, and I wish I knew exactly where I was going. Obviously for me, languages are very important, and I've done Spanish and French with Swampscott High School now, and I certainly intend to use them. And there's lots of really interesting dual enrollment programs with American colleges that pair with colleges in Europe. So I don't yet know where I'm headed, but I will certainly be delving further into the languages.
Nice.
Terrific.
I want to pursue a career in public health and potentially go to medical school. My mom runs Salem Community Health Center, which is a public health center. And I definitely am super interested in public health and helping underserved communities have quality, access to quality, affordable healthcare. So that's something I'm really passionate about and want to pursue.
Impressive young people. Very
It's amazing, you guys.
Inspiring, guys.
Congratulations to you all on your recognition. Thank you, Mr. Kohat, for acknowledging the kids. And you're free to stick around, or you're free to go do some homework. Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to share my screen now and pull up the superintendent's report. A couple of things that I would like to highlight tonight before we get into really the meat of what I'll be presenting. And that is that we were talking about early on in our program, the fact that we would be having family technology training. And I'm happy to report with our new technology hire, we will be offering bi-weekly technology trainings for parents, guardians, and caregivers, which will begin on Wednesday, December 2nd. They will all be via Zoom, and they will all be beginning at 6:30. The Zoom links are going to be posted on the district calendar, and I just wanted to link that here so people can actually see where to go. So if you click on the link here, it takes you to our website, which also takes you to
Pam, you're not sharing your
yes.
screen yet. You're not sharing your screen yet.
It's not sharing?
No, like we're seeing you still, not your screen.
Oh,
Here it comes.
okay.
All right, now
So
we have
I'll go back to the report. Thank you. So this is where you would find the link. So the first one is going to be on December 2nd. And so once they post that link here, families can come here, parents, families, caregivers, and they can click on the Zoom link to attend. So as I was saying, all of them will be taking place at 6:30 via Zoom. And the technology department is alternating nights of the weeks to include everybody, because we all know that people have set schedules and that Tuesdays might not be good for everybody. So they begin on December 2nd with managing your Google Calendar. Then on Wednesday, December 14th, there's going to be tips and challenges of remote learning. And then on Thursday, December 17th, Google Classroom, the Guardian view. So what parents see in Google Classroom from the outside looking in. So those are just the first 3 that are scheduled. There'll be lots of publicity on these and reminders from the individual schools to families about these technology trainings, but they are opportunities for parents and caregivers to get involved and really understand this virtual world that we're living in. The next item that the technology department worked on, which I find incredibly helpful, and I shared this with school committee earlier this week, there is a technology help flowchart, which is also located on our webpage under the family help section. So I'm just going to take you there for a minute. When you have a question about your child's device they're using or password, there is an entire flowchart that's located on the website. So the tech need is I need help with my device. An app is not on the device isn't working properly. You can email techhelp@swampscott.k12.ma.us, and the families and students would do that, and also staff could link into our incident IQ. So if you're a family or a student, you go to the Tech Help email address. If you're a staff member, we have something called Incident IQ, where you log in and you can put your problem in there, and the tech department will get back to you. So Google passwords and general questions about Google, families, students, and staff, they're articulated between the specialists. So high school, Brandy Wilbur, middle school, Jessica Bombardier, elementary, they are linked here as well. I'm not going to read you this entire flowchart, but it's pretty comprehensive. And as I jokingly said to school committee earlier this week, there were many a year where the go-to person was LaTanya Mackey, and now we are spreading the wealth. We have an actual department to manage all of our devices and really spreading. There's so much knowledge within this department that it really is kind of taking the burden and spreading the burden on everyone to assist you, and will get you more help and get you faster help. So I just wanted to tell everybody what that is. It is on our webpage. I'm actually going to take you back to our webpage and show you where you can find it on the webpage. If you go to Family Technology Help, you have to scroll all the way to the bottom of this page to see that technology. Look here to find who to ask for help. And that will take you to that document I just shared, We have other languages here that you can also click on, but this is where you will find the technology flowchart, help flowchart. Something I also shared with school a little bit today is that, winter season is coming before you know it. There was an email exchange between Kelly Wolf, our athletic director, and Mr. Kohut, our high school principal. And I think this committee needs to start thinking about, what are we going to do? Our occupational health nurse, Mrs. Amanda Mulcahy, could not be here tonight, but I do anticipate her being at the next meeting. There is an NEC conference meeting on Friday, Mr. Kohut notified me. And what we were talking about is having Ms. Wolf bring forward the committee, to the committee, the modifications of each of the sports. So, there's health metrics to consider, there's health data to consider within our schools, and then we also have facilities considerations. So it's not a topic of tonight. I don't feel fully equipped to talk about it, but I do think we should invite, the committee should invite the athletic director, high school principal after the meeting on Friday to our next meeting in order to have this discussion. It's no secret that we are educating our 3rd and 4th graders from Stanley at the high school in the gymnasium. And if we are moving forward with basketball, what is that going to look like? What are the implications? Do we want to support a winter sports season where students are in playing, but there are no spectators? So there's a lot of considerations to make. And I just wanted to put that on our radar for the next meeting.
Pam, could I interject for 1 second?
Sure.
Similar to when we were discussing the fall, could we include, not to invite them, but include sort of the coach's perspective? Maybe Ms. Wolf, when she's talking to us, can just let us know if she's talked to the individual coaches of the different sports to get their sort of take on what they think is possible and makes sense, et cetera.
Sure, I'll ask, as long as the committee is telling me to formally invite the athletic director and Mr. Kohut to the next meeting, we'll get some feedback, and they'll have more information after Friday's meeting. In addition, there's only been a vote so far. There has not been a full vote of the MIAA, so they can bring that information forward as well.
All right, please do consider, please do formally invite them. I think that's.
I will. And I think having the coaches' perspectives as well, Mrs. Marshall, I'll make sure that they do that. I made note of that. I would be remiss not to talk about Thanksgiving as it's next week. We all know that the recommendation is not to travel, and that we are all being held to the standard of following the state travel guidance, which I've also linked here. Students who are traveling will need to plan to work remotely on Monday, November 30th, because the guidance is such that you have to provide a negative PCR test and be cleared by the school nurse or the OHN on Monday. So therefore, their earliest return date for people that travel would be Tuesday. We are actually sending out, today I sent out a Thanksgiving travel form to all faculty and staff, and we are asking them to fill it out as well, because that's going to have implications for staffing come back the November 30th. And we are going to be sending out the family form tomorrow, and we are asking for families just to be transparent about your travel plans if you are going to travel, particularly to a state that is considered red and following the state guidance for return, either a negative PCR test, which would be submitted to the school, as I said, but our protocols are such that you need to be cleared by a school nurse or the OHN to return to school. So it's impossible to do all that on Sunday. So anyone going away that fills out this form, you would anticipate being home working remote, your children working remotely from Monday, November 30th, because they would not be able to return until the earliest on Tuesday. And as I said, we're not only collecting that information from families, but we're collecting it from staff, faculty and staff as well, so that in anticipation of staffing issues for Monday the 30th, we can figure that out. It's a great form. It did go out to staff today, and it will be going home to families tomorrow.
Superintendent?
Yes.
Does that also include if you're hosting guests from those red states?
We did not get into hosting. We're hoping that families are going to make good decisions. I've heard, in fact, I was speaking with a colleague today who said they might be hosting, but they might be eating in 2 separate rooms. You know, we can, our reach, I believe, can only go so far. So we did not get into hosts and gathering. And if you're more than 10 people, we did ask that you, if you are traveling, that you just let us know. Because one of the things that we're incredibly proud of is how low our in-school incident rate has been. And I'd like to think that is because of all the precautions we've taken and all the safety measures, the protocols, and everything else that we're doing. And we don't want to have a change in that data after Thanksgiving. The next item on my agenda is a fully in-person learning plan. After the governor's press conference on November 6th, I received several emails from families who were asking that I bring forward my plan for fully in-person learning in our schools. And I'm here to tell the committee that that's not going to happen. The governor's press conference that day was about bringing students back in person fully, if feasible, were the words at the end of his statement. And MASS is the Massachusetts Association for School Superintendents, and they made a statement. And I'm just going to read briefly the statement that is important to have the community understand. I also shared this previously with the school committee. During the past several days, many superintendents have expressed concerns with the governor's press conference on Friday, November 6th, when he set expectations that schools and communities designated as gray, green, or yellow return student learning fully in person, if feasible. Clearly, the words "if feasible" are key to any possible return of in-person options. Based on the guidance provided by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and the decision of the administration to have each school district determine its return to school plan, the better part of the spring and summer were spent by local districts to develop plans, negotiate agreements with local unions, and abide by the health and safety protocols. While superintendents have been strong advocates for as much in-school learning as possible, there are several realities which require the governor's help before many months of planning can be altered. The first is convincing evidence that less than 6 feet of distance is safe. The second, school bus transportation must allow for significantly larger bus capacity. And the third is help with collective bargaining provisions, since there is no way to make unilateral changes in previous agreements that we've made with local unions. And I share that with you because in addition to that, this committee voted to adhere to the CDC guidance. The guidance of 6 feet and social distancing. We cannot bring everyone back fully in person at 6 feet of social distancing. The other change from the CDC that we are following is the guidance of a close contact being 15 minutes cumulative in a 24-hour period. DESE, the health department at DESE, is not acknowledging this change in this guidance from the CDC. They are sticking with 15 minutes in a short period of time. That's pretty vague. I'd like to think, and my team would like to think, that the reason our numbers within our schools are so low is because we are maintaining this 6-foot guidance. And as we said to our educators, if they are maintaining 6 feet guidance at all times, social distancing, there should be no close contacts. If they're adhering to the PPE that we've provided, the masks with the shields, in the event that they have to tie a little one's shoe or zipper their coat, there should not be a close contact identified. The last point I'd like to make is our elementary schools are older. And as we've gone through this MSBA project in process for a new elementary school, the square footage in our general classrooms, because of the age of our buildings, are so small that at 6 feet, our occupancy is tied. It limits our capacity for fully in person all the time. So we have a few challenges. So again, if feasible means if possible. And right now for our district, it's not possible. I will say again that nobody wants our students in fully in person more than myself and my team. It is just not possible at this time. Which brings me to an update on our hybrid model. I've mentioned to this committee and at these meetings that I was hoping to go to a 3-2 model following Thanksgiving. It was a great goal, but after further discussion and conversations with both my central office team and my leadership team, we've decided to stay the course for now and for a few reasons. If we look ahead the next 6 weeks between now and Thanksgiving and the December holidays, we only have 23 school days. We have only been in a hybrid model for 1 month, not even a month yet, but close to a month. We also talked about the fact that every decision we've made has been based on data, health data, academic data. On November 4th, Dr. Bacon presented the assessments of reading and math to this committee. We talked about the fact that it is not just a challenge that our district is facing, it is a challenge that the districts are facing across the Commonwealth, and as I mentioned last night at town meeting, across the nation. You know, the facilities did not cause these data numbers. The pandemic did. We were charged with flipping to a remote model last spring, and it was challenging on our students, our families, and our staff. So we want to wait until our mid-year assessments, those same assessments that will occur in January. And if we're going to change our model, it makes the most sense that we have the data behind it to make decisions. So and in speaking with the teachers, the leadership of the teachers union today, along with my leadership team, we want to work together now, between now and those January assessments, to have a solid plan of what we're going to do if that data doesn't change. We don't know if we're going to see growth because of the hybrid model. I know people are criticizing the fact that we're only in half day, but if you talk to the teachers, and there are many of them in attendance here tonight, the 4 hours of in-person instruction is more intense than a normal school day of long ago, because there aren't the interruptions. They are on task. They are getting through the assignments. They are instructing intensely, and it's very, very busy and exhausting, as they will share with you. So we're talking about waiting till we get those assessments in January, analyzing them. If we see growth, then we make modifications. If we don't see growth across the board, we're going to have to do something incredibly different, whether it's reassigning, whether it is assigning students across the district. But one of the things that I do want to tell you that we are doing, we have made a plan of what we can do between now and then. And what we're doing with Mr. Casper presenting the facilities reports tonight is the administrators have been instructed to go back and really look at the capacity of their classrooms and bringing more high needs students in person between now and January. More in-person time for students that are struggling, and identify students that are not meeting academic progress right now. We want to work towards extending the school day for high needs students in the afternoon. So will we be bringing those students in for full days between now and January? We're looking at ways that we can do that, and we're looking at capacity of our classrooms. And then in January, we want to really see, have we closed those achievement gaps for our students? If we have, then we'll continue in the hybrid model. The reason the 3-2 is not going to work is because we're very, very concerned about our remote learners, and teachers have expressed that is their time to really connect with the remote learners, and they don't want to lose that. If we haven't made progress in January, as I said, we've talked about table work groups right now and figuring out what a restructuring would look like come January. I know how data-driven this committee is. I know how data-driven we are with the health metrics through this pandemic. And I think we do need that data to support any changes that we're going to make, particularly if you think about the next 6 weeks and only 23 school days. And also, if you think about the fact that we've only been in this hybrid model for 1 month, not even. So those are some reasons why we are going to stay the course right now. I don't know if Martha Raymond or Jean Bacon want to chime in with any of their thoughts. If not, I will take any questions from the committee.
I think, Pam, I think you, or Superintendent, I think you clearly stated just what we're trying to do is squeeze any excess capacity that we have in our day to bring kids in as much as possible. And we can start doing that after Thanksgiving. It's not a huge shift in everybody, but we can really target our instruction and support where it needs to be. And we do have some programs in special education that are in full day currently, which is great.
So I'm not sure if so I have to say, with all due respect, and I know that team that is sitting around the table discussing this wants nothing more than for these kids to be at school. But I'm not sure if I'm really understanding why. I'm not sure if I'm really understanding this. It seems like if we weren't, well, first of all, if we weren't in the pandemic, we would be in a normal situation. But like it doesn't seem like we need data to know that our kids need more time in the classroom.
If we went to the 3-2 model, the cohorts would be getting 4 hours additional instruction every other week. 4 hours. Okay. And can you remind us of those kids, the students that are remote? Because I know that we can't give them short shrift. What are the numbers there again? I'm going to look to Dr. Bacon on the actual numbers.
About 20% of our student body, and it's pretty evenly spread across the 3 levels, elementary, middle, and high school. And the model for the remote learners is slightly different at each of the schools. Wednesday in the morning is the day that our remote learners have pretty much constant contact with a live instructor.
Okay. Well, that
So
makes
we don't want to give, if we went to fully in person on Wednesday mornings, we would have to give that up for our remote learners. So that's part of the reason that after, more consideration, we decided not to move to the 3-2 model, because that would benefit again to the tune of, 4 hours additional instruction every other week. That would be benefiting our in-person learners, but it would cut the time that we currently are able to devote some attention and incorporation of our remote learners into our educational program on Wednesday mornings.
What our concern is in looking at that next data point in January is that what is, and Mrs. Raymond has said this and repeatedly in several meetings, is if we don't make changes, if we don't see growth in January, and if we don't make changes at that time, what is September going to look like? Is it going to be with a mass amount of retentions because students aren't ready to move on to the next grade level? But we also have to give our teachers the opportunity to try to close those gaps. And that's what's happening now. In talking with the classroom teachers, particularly at the elementary level, the amount of instruction they're getting in right now, the amount of intensity in that instruction, the hope is that we're going to see growth come January. This was from March to June last year. And now we took that data the beginning of this year. Now we're in November, but we've only been in hybrid for a month. I really feel like, and I've also heard some feedback that everything keeps changing. We're changing things all the time. So we've I know that the committee knows that sometimes it's hard for me to do. We have to hit pause and really be thoughtful about how we move forward and why we're moving forward with a model that we are. That Wednesday, the teachers voiced they were not looking forward to losing that connection with the remote learners if they went to a 3-2 model. I don't think it's fair. We can do more check-ins. We can do more check-ins now with our remote learners and the social emotional health of those kids. So we're looking at different ways to connect with the kids between now and January, But to make a decision, as I said to my team today, based on a date being Thanksgiving versus data does not make sense to me.
John, I see your hand raised.
Thanks, Amy. And Superintendent, just kind of following up on your report where you said you want to look at the data in January. Once January comes around, maybe this is more of a hypothetical, but once January comes and you look at the data, and if you determine you do need to make a change, how quickly can that change be made? I think there might be a concern that this is being studied, but actually executing might be, that might be a little bit slower. So how quickly can the administration pivot and implement any needed change if needed?
Well, I think I just mentioned that one of the things we've all discussed as a leadership team and with the teachers is that we have to work collaboratively beginning now to have a plan in place in the event the data doesn't change. What is January going to look like, or what is the end of January, beginning of February going to look like? We can't wait till we get that data to make a plan. And so what we've decided is, beginning right after Thanksgiving, we're going to be putting a working group together of educators and administrators, and we're going to figure out if gloom and doom occurs after we get that January data, what are we flipping to? And the piece that I'm not saying that is missing, that is going to be obvious, is that once we've determined what that might look like, we need to inform the community that if the data doesn't show growth, this is what we're going to do. And it might be drastic. We've talked about the word drastic in order to bring our students to where they need to be to progress through our K-12, pre-K to 12 education. So I want to emphasize, we're not waiting until January to figure out what to do. We're starting right after Thanksgiving, and it's going to be the teachers working with the administrators to try to figure out a plan that if the data doesn't improve, this is what we agree we'll move to.
So will families, can we expect to hear in mid-December what a doomsday scenario would look like?
I don't say mid-December, I would say I would hope the end of December. I can't put a time frame on it. All I can tell you is we're going to consistently meet and work on a plan, and we will inform families as soon as possible. As I've said repeatedly, families need to plan.
Yeah. Karen?
Understand that.
So, well, I mean, I'm glad to hear that you guys are, going to be planning that now, because I agree with John that everybody's going to want to know, at least in some form or fashion, what that might look like if things aren't getting better. But I mean, I hope that this intense small group instruction does turn out to bring good results, as well as the live Zooming that's bringing more, synchronous instruction. Hopefully that will help. But I think I'm concerned, I know parents are concerned that, if it doesn't, that we're ready to do something and they want to see a path forward. And I think in your previous update, you were discussing what the barriers are to that, the 6 feet, getting people back to a normal situation, what the barriers are. And I think we know and we understand that, but I think we just have to be clear in saying that while those barriers are still in place, and this is what we're dealing with, that we are constantly at least trying to inch towards as normal as possible and as much in-person instruction as we can get if it's valuable. And I trust you guys. I mean, it's disappointing to hear because the 3-2 sounded good, right? It sounded like more time in school. It sounded like that was moving forward. But I hear what you're saying. It's only 4 hours every other week and maybe not worth it. But
it's not even that. It is our remote kids.
Right.
We know that our remote students aren't getting the same amount of face time as our hybrid cohorts that are in the building. And so to take that one solid piece of connection away from those kids is just not the right thing to do.
So then my follow-up to that is, in January, I think when people picked remote, that carried through till the end of the year, or January, correct? So are people going to reselect whether they want to come back or go remote?
That is another piece we spoke about today, that we know that we had that January timeframe where when people committed to remote learning, we asked them to commit through January. One of the things that we talked about today is we're really going to have to look at capacity, and we're going to have to look at, is there space to bring those remote kids back in a hybrid model? Has our capacity in the classrooms changed? If we utilize that, will that allow us to do that? Well, we even went so far today, do I dare say it, that if some students are doing really well and they're doing well in a remote model, or they're doing well in school, do we have to shift who's actually in person? Those are the CDC metrics going to change, and that suddenly 3 feet distancing is going to be acceptable. We don't know that. So at some point, we talked about communicating with the families, when January rolls around, how many people want to maintain remote learning? How many people would like to come in? And then we're going to have to go through the spaces and figure that out. Are any of our hybrid students going to want to go fully remote because maybe the data on the virus has changed? We don't know. So there's a lot of unknowns. I feel like I'm saying this every single meeting and every single month, but I wrote a letter to our staff today, and I said every single day, there's new guidance, there's new directives, there's new information, there's new everything, and it hasn't stopped since March 13th. So that's the reality of it. We understand that families want communication and they want it as soon as possible, and we are striving to provide that. But I'm also trying to be incredibly honest and telling you that we made a decision that we're not taking Wednesdays away from the remote learners because that's too important to us. And in speaking with some teachers one-on-one today, talking about how their morning went and how great it was to connect with those remote learners, I'm not going to do that. So, and then we also had a philosophical discussion about what is it that we're trying to do? Are we trying to get the most students in person the most amount of time, or are we trying to work with our high needs students to really close the achievement gaps from what we've seen happen since last March? And I think I can speak for my entire team in that it wasn't just about the numbers, it's about closing those achievement gaps for the struggling students, whether they be special education students, whether they be English language learners, or whether they just be your typically developing child who is struggling during a pandemic. Those are the kids that we're targeting. It isn't just about the most amount of face time right now. Would I love to go back to 5 days a week, 5 full days? I would love that. That seems like a walk in the park right now. But the reality is we have to focus and target the students that are struggling the most, the ones that are struggling social emotionally, the ones that are struggling academically, and it is our collective responsibility to deliver services in a way that are going to meet their needs. And so the decision might not be popular, and it was the 3-2 model was something we were definitely considering. But then when you sit in a room and have a conversation with 17 experienced educators who have hundreds of years in education, and you talk about what's important to us as a district, this is where we landed.
Thanks.
Tabitha, I see your hand raised.
Sorry, can I do one more?
Oh, I'm sorry, Karen.
That's okay, because it's just related to that as well. I was just wondering if there was any update on what Dr. Bacon was talking about at the last meeting in terms of hiring some tutors or facilitators or people to help. I know that was a big push, and I just didn't know if we were having any luck finding people.
Yes, I'll let Dr. Bacon speak to that.
Yep, I posted a whole bunch of positions. We have 19 applicants. We're spending all day tomorrow interviewing them. And then our goal is to start up the tutoring right after Thanksgiving.
Great, awesome, thank you.
Tabitha, did you have a question?
I just wanted to add that I am a fully remote student, and I know some of my friends who are also fully remote students, and Wednesdays are a really important day for us because not all of our teachers are able to broadcast during days that aren't Wednesday. So Wednesdays are actually our only time interacting with our teachers, seeing what's happening in class. And when you're a fully remote student, you're just on your computer basically all day, kind of guiding yourself through your courses, your curriculum, your homework, your assignments, asynchronous versus synchronous. And it's a lot to manage. So I think Wednesdays are definitely, even though it's just 20 minutes, are beneficial to myself and beneficial to my peers. So I understand that overall people may think that, more like synchronous time would be beneficial for the majority of students. But I also think it's like what the superintendent was saying, it's important to not discount those who are fully remote and I also think Wednesdays benefit those who even are hybrid, because it's a chance to be on a Zoom call with your classmates that may be fully remote. So I think that this decision is definitely one that benefits students in the school.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Karen, I see your hand is still raised. I'm not sure if that's just an oversight, but now Martha Seibert, I see your hand is raised.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Dr. Bacon was saying, that we're also looking at our Boston-based population, and we're exploring tutoring opportunities closer to home for them to reach out and help them with their learning experience as well.
That's really good to know. Yeah, I think I'll echo what Karen said before. I get it, and the decision makes sense. It's just disappointing, just because everybody's just so anxious to get back to normal, and every little step forward seems like it's just disappointing, but it makes sense.
Hey, Amy, I can't raise my hand because I have a co-host, but I wanted to make a comment about superintendent's when she was just talking about returning the high needs kids and focusing on the high needs kids and everything. And I just want to make sure that we also, I know you mean this and you're not saying it, but like all the kids are being focused on, because the model we're choosing to use with the intensity and the quality of instruction and the focus of instruction, I think is even if we're not bringing kids in for more time, I think that the quality of time for every kid, not just the kids that are struggling, the kids that are just actually doing well and doing okay, they're getting awesome instruction with that focused. I just want to make sure that we just don't lose. I know you're talking about everyone when you talk, but sometimes it sounds like we're prioritizing certain kids, and we're definitely prioritizing catching kids up. But I think we're also, I think the focus really is about keeping kids where they need to be, and even pushing them ahead too.
I think that's a good point. And I think what it comes down to is providing quality education and quality instruction in the time that we're in. When I think about some of the silver linings, or try to find silver linings in this pandemic, part of it is I really feel like our teachers and our educators almost know every single student better than they do if we were fully in person, because you're seeing students from a different perspective. And so you're right, it isn't just about our high needs, it's about every single individual child in our district and where they're at, meeting them where they're at, pushing them to go where their potential, their fullest potential, but also trying to bring up those students that are struggling. So you're right, although I didn't articulate it's every student, it is every student. It's not, if I think back to my day, I probably would have fallen under the radar. I wasn't a problem student, I wasn't struggling, I wasn't, building rockets, but I think every child is important, and I really do think our educators have a focus on, more so than ever, on every single student they serve. With your permission, Madam Chair, I'd like to go on to the facilities update.
Before you do, Superintendent, this is just a little bit distracting for me. There's somebody on the call who's also named Pamela Angelakis. Does everybody else see that? Or is it just me? I'm seeing somebody that it's just a static photo of somebody sitting, a dark-haired woman looking at a computer. Does anybody know?
What?
Does anybody else see that?
I know, I see it.
Okay. Does anyone know who that is?
No, they're muted. It's Mary Beth
Oh,
Shea.
it's Mary Beth Shea. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know why that came out like that, but I just corrected it. Thanks for noticing it. I thought it said Pam because she was speaking when I logged on. Thank you.
Okay,
Mystery solved.
now the photo makes sense. Okay, thank you.
I'll be happy to go to Clark tomorrow. You can come to my office.
Okay, so now that we solved that mystery, I do, I want to backtrack a little bit before we go into Mr. Casper's report and just say that I really want to give kudos to you and your team for the, not only that tech flow and how easy it is to find out on the site, but also for developing parent training. You know, we talked very early in the school year about the need to partner with our caregivers, particularly for the young ones, because they're carrying a larger burden than usual. So thank you, Superintendent and Ms. Mackey-Knowles for managing that. I think that's the right thing for our district to do.
I am going to go back. Well, actually, I don't have to. I'm going to go to the agenda. And if Mr. Casper is around, I will, I brought up what he put in your folder for you, and I'll try to expand them a little bit. Mr. Casper?
Marcus, for the introduction. Hello, members of the school committee. Nice to be with you again here. So I'm here tonight to update you on the status of our ventilation projects that have been ongoing over the last few months and will be continuing moving forward. And just to give a brief sort of overview of how we got to where we are today, and then I'm going to run through these updated floor plans. These are new floor plans from our architect based off of the latest detailed information that we now have. So, you know, from a very early point, we understood that the ventilation in our buildings was a cornerstone of getting back into the spaces during the pandemic. Ventilation is an important system and an important topic generally, but sometimes it's misunderstood and neglected, frankly. And during a pandemic where the quality of the air and the transmission through the air is heightened, ventilation has really come to the forefront, and rightfully so. And especially in old buildings, you have a heightened concern over what your ventilation is, how it was designed, whether it's working properly. So from that sort of baseline, we at an early point hired LBA architects to do an overview along with their mechanical engineer consultants of our 4 oldest school buildings. Actually, I'm sorry, the first overview also included the high school, but we dropped the high school off of the analysis and detailed work because of the results of that first sort of overview report from LBA. And that was the architects and engineers taking a broad perspective of the buildings, of the spaces, of the ventilation systems that we have in our buildings. And they reported back to us as to basically what we can expect to get out of that equipment and expect to get out of those spaces, and coded the different areas in the different buildings according to what information was available to them at that time, and basically notified us of problematic spaces that did not have even the bones of what would be a proper ventilation system, such as the old building at Stanley, and then also pointed out other spaces that looked like they were problematic spaces from a ventilation perspective. So that was the first sort of phase of the first phase, I'll say, of the ventilation projects. And one of their key recommendations in the report was that we need to take our understanding of what we have in our buildings and in our systems to another level. And specifically, they recommended that we have a mechanical contractor go through all of the spaces, check the equipment, and also take physical measurements of what the equipment in our classrooms and in our spaces is producing for fresh air and ventilation. So that was a major undertaking that we had to put out to bid, and we did hire a contractor, as I previously reported on a few months back. And over the last few months, we've been working through that project. And what that project has entailed is a mechanical contractor going through each and every piece of ventilation equipment in our district, other than what is at the high school because of its age and just how different that equipment is. And that's a tremendous amount of equipment. Basically every single classroom in the 4 older buildings have their own classroom specific unit ventilator. And in addition to that, there are larger systems that serve larger spaces in the form of air handlers. So there's really quite a lot of equipment. So the mechanical contractor went through and looked at that, made minor repairs on that, made adjustments to that equipment, and notated anything that was more problematic, and also potentially made some minor adjustments that could improve air quality. And some of them were temporary type fixes that would get us through a shorter period of time. And following the mechanical contractor, a control subcontractor of the mechanical contractor also went through. So the controls are what, on a very simple level, in like a single family home, would be like your thermostat that controls your heating equipment. But as you get into bigger and more complex buildings, the controls systems also get more complex, and they really play a pivotal role in properly functioning ventilation and heating and HVAC in general. So for example, at the high school, in a modern system, because of the level of your modern controls and the ability to do things with modern controls, that was part of the reason that the high school was so easy for us to manage, because we could go in and make basically computer programming changes on this modern digital controls. In all of the other buildings, for the most part, we're dealing with pneumatic type controls, which are air moving through small pipes and controlling dampers and controlling thermostats. It's really quite fascinating, but also can be very, very concerning. So the control subcontractor was really critical in seeing what was going on in all of these spaces and how the equipment was being controlled. That was sort of the second piece of the survey analysis, the recommissioning analysis. And then the third prong of this was the tab contractor. So this is, again, a subcontractor of the mechanical contractor who actually goes through all of the equipment and takes physical measurements of the airflow of the incoming air and exhausting air in the different spaces of the different equipment, and is able to measure the outside air that is coming into the spaces and out of the air that is being exhausted. And those measurements were something that the mechanical engineer really wanted us to get towards, so that we could really bring our analysis of the spaces to another level. Again, there was a real broad approach early on to what we had and what we could do with it. And then as we were phasing in the openings before we had all of this information that is currently available, what we were doing was we were making sure that equipment was working, that dampers were working before we would open up any space to in-person learning. But even at that sort of middle of the road point in time, we didn't know the detailed measurements of all our equipment. And now that this phase of the ventilation project has come to a close, we have all of this information now at our disposal. All of the spaces have been measured, and we have all this data. We have all of the reports from the mechanical contractor of all the spaces and all the rooms, the reports from the controls contractor, and then probably the most critical to the analysis that I'm going to run through now is the tab reports, which give us these fresh air numbers and what really our mechanical ventilation systems are doing.
Mr. Casper, can I just explain the tab reports are testing and balancing? That's what that stands for, correct? Just because I knew they were testing and balancing, and every time Mr. Casper called it a tab report, I was like, what? So
It's an acronym. That's spot on. Thanks for pointing that out. So we have all of these reports, and we're doing a number of things with all of the information. Most we've taken it and worked with the mechanical engineer and worked with the architect to develop the floor plans that you're seeing right in front of you today. I know they probably look quite similar to the original floor plans, but they really are incredibly different. They're based on an entirely different analysis with a lot more information behind what is coming out on the reports. So, and there's a different key now as well. And I'm gonna run through that quickly. And if you see, this is the first one here. This is the Clark School, and a number of the spaces are green, and that now stands for rooms that may be occupied with socially distant occupancy, window usage still recommended. So from the tab reports, the actor uses his calculators that are based off of ASHRAE standards. ASHRAE is an engineering body that sets airflow and ventilation standards that codes are based off of. So he takes the measurements that have been found in the different spaces and is able to set a maximum occupancy for a particular space, depending on its size, use, and airflow, that a maximum population that can be served safely by the airflow that we're getting out of the mechanical ventilation in those spaces. So what we've done in these new floor plans is taken those maximum occupancies and compared them to our spaces to say, does the mechanical ventilation in a given space support an occupancy in that space under socially distant occupancy? And are spaces that meet that standard, that under today, a building built in 2020 ASHRAE standard for ventilation, those spaces would meet that for an occupancy at social distancing, which is what we're currently doing in our building, 6-foot social distancing. Now, the purple rooms are rooms that have mechanical ventilation, but the mechanical ventilation measured at a level that does not support occupancy.
we lost you, Max.
No.
We lost your sound.
We hear nothing.
Perhaps you should try removing the earbuds and just doing with the computer mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Not just a director of
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Jean, I hope that you're on the help desk.
Now I can't hear anyone now.
Uh-oh.
Let me shut the Bluetooth off. Sorry about this. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, great, and I can hear you as well. I apologize.
No.
That was strange. Okay, I was at a really important point there too. So the purple spaces are spaces where the mechanical ventilation measurements were lower. They were underperforming, and that is telling us that the rates that we had at the time of the measurement didn't support under 2020 ASHRAE standards, even in occupancy under social distancing. Now, a really critical distinction that I've went through in detail with the mechanical engineer is that does not mean that these spaces can't be occupied or even can't be occupied at social distant numbers. What it does mean is that we need to prioritize these spaces for other mitigation and other means of improving ventilation and potentially even use of purifiers. So these are rooms that in our notes on the current plan are saying that window usage is now mandatory. Window usage, although we've never been relying on window usage as the sole means of ventilating our spaces in our schools, we can't ignore the fact that window usage does increase airflow substantially. And in a room that is underperforming mechanically from a ventilation perspective, you really do need to look to natural ventilation to support that. Now, not only are we recommending window usage in these spaces, actually mandating window usage in these purple spaces, and there's not that many of them. As we go through the different schools, you'll see it's actually only a handful, and hopefully we will be able to repair the issues over the coming weeks and months to get the numbers in those spaces up anyways. But in addition to window usage being mandatory in these purple spaces, we're also still recommending window usage in the green spaces. It's with these older buildings and these older systems, even though we have mechanical ventilation that's operable and bringing in pretty decent numbers, with all the uncertainty around everything from the pandemic and the virus transmission, it's still a good idea to increase ventilation through the use of some natural ventilation, as long as you're not making the room uncomfortable to a point of not really being occupiable. So
Max, can I highlight for the committee this right here? Window utilization does not mean every single window open 12 inches. The bottom part of this says, for good practice and balance, comfort, open 1 or 2 windows about 6 inches. That's it. So we're not talking about a row of windows in a Clark Elementary School classroom, all 5 of them being open 12 inches. We're talking about 1 or 2 windows being open.
You muted.
Superintendent, you're muted.
I can probably pick up on her point there. When we first started to give this directive that you really should be using your windows, and it's not a bad idea to use the windows, we had a lot of spaces where people were opening up all of the windows to their full extent. And when you get a cold day with that much open windows, you're going to really have some very uncomfortable spaces and spaces that are just too cool. And this note comes directly from our mechanical engineer on a sort of a balanced approach to window usage, that you can increase air quality significantly and airflow significantly without basically freezing out the occupants in a specific room. And this is that guidance exactly. 1 or 2 windows 6 inches is going to increase airflow and really give you more substantial air changes, which is what we're going for.
Have the teachers, particularly in those purple rooms, but really all the rooms, have the teachers been shown how to do this?
Well, we have shared this document earlier in the week. This is just was finished over the weekend, this document, and we have shared it with the union, and we've shared it with the principals, and we've been giving instruction to the principals about window usage and the like over at all times, basically. And things have been changing and the directives have been changing, but I mean, there's not there's not a training program to show them how to open their windows, but
I guess I would rely on the head of the union to say so, but just in the negotiations that we've been going through with the teachers union, that there's a high level of anxiety. So I think that if we could make somebody available, especially in those classrooms that are purple, to just take 5 minutes and say, this is what we recommend. It seems like an easy, if they want that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a back and forth with the union the whole time, and we've had productive communication. And even earlier this week, it looks like we're going to be setting up another sort of call for them to ask me some additional questions and work through some things. We're trying to make all of these spaces as safe as possible, and whenever we get information about a particular space that is of concern to us, we're flagging that and trying to make changes and improvements to those spaces. So, on that note, some of these purple spaces that may be like the most underperforming, we are now going to consider bringing in air purifiers into those rooms to supplement the ventilation and filtration that already exists, both natural and mechanical, and just target some of these areas, in addition to, like I said before, taking steps to further fix the problems that we have in there. So I think that's a good place to pivot to tell you what is still going on, right? So over the course of this survey and recommissioning of all our equipment, there were things that were noted that needed additional attention that couldn't be fixed sort of on the fly as we were working through all of the rooms and all of the buildings. And these are things that are being repaired right now and will be over the coming weeks and coming months. And hopefully at the end of that phase, we are really going to have probably better control and better working ventilation equipment in our schools than we've had in a very, very long time, I would say, given some of the things that we see kind of in the depths of the equipment and in the controls.
You want me to go on to the next one, Max?
Yeah, if we could work through some of these. I want to speak to Stanley a little bit. I know there's been a lot of questions about Stanley, so.
Can I ask you a question about the nurse medical waiting rooms? Are they at a different standard? Are there different levels of what's happening there?
Sure. Yeah, they have been treated totally differently. We had LBA take a specific look at those spaces as we chose the location of the medical waiting rooms and looked at the nurses' suites. So they're blue because we've treated them totally differently. We actually added some equipment at an early stage to create negative pressure in most of the isolation rooms. I'm sorry, the medical waiting rooms. And then we also worked with the mechanical engineer to give a directive specific to each nurse's space on how to safely occupy that space. We went specific to each and every room, depending on the conditions with what they had for windows and what we had done to add equipment in. We gave specific recommendations. And on top of that, our first order of purifiers was ordered specifically for the 5 nurses' suites in the 5 buildings. And those are actually being installed this week as they just arrived. And it's a pretty nice unit that was, again, recommended by the mechanical engineer that has a pre-filter, a HEPA filter, and also an added piece of UV treatment, which is really a nice feature that our engineer was supportive of. And these are units that our first order of business was these nurses' spaces, because there was a lot of concern expressed by the nurses, rightfully so, because they are treating potentially sick people in these spaces. So we did want to give really a lot of attention to those. And then we identified some of the orange spaces, which are typical office type use spaces that are just pretty much across the board have a lot of ventilation issues. Most of these spaces are, single occupancy areas, and it's not too concerning, but some of them are places where there's people coming in and out a little bit, and there's not necessarily people congregating there. It's not the same level of concern that you would have with a classroom, but still they're not necessarily just single occupancy offices. And this is where we've actually picked a second round of places to place these air purifiers just to support the air in those spaces. And then it looks like with the information that we're gathered here, we're going to have a third round of targeted air purification in a number of the classrooms, and that's going to be rolling out as well. So here at Stanley, again, I know it's a point of concern in the community, and we understand that. The old wing at Stanley, which was at the very first round, was identified by LBA as a major problem from a ventilation perspective because it does not have a mechanical exhaust system. So it's the only large area in any of our school buildings that does not have some sort of a mechanical exhaust. And mechanical exhaust is critical, especially from a building-wide perspective, because you can't just bring air. You need air to have somewhere to go. You need to move air. It's not a one-sided equation. So when you have an entire wing of a building with no exhaust, you're just not going to get the level of airflow that you want to see. And that's why these rooms and this whole area was marked that way from the beginning. And I wanted to speak to what we're doing to fix that. Now it's a bigger fix because it's different than what we're dealing with in the rest of our buildings, where we have existing equipment that we need to fix, that we need to improve, that we need to clear out and get working properly. In Stanley, we have a void of equipment. So we actually need to do a new installation of a mechanical exhaust system. And we've been working with the engineer to figure out what the best path is there. And we have settled on the correct type of system that will, efficiently and hopefully rather quickly. We don't have an exact idea on what the timeline is just yet, but it's going to basically take what was an old gravity system that was plugged up at some point in history and put a new mechanical ducted system into the core of that building and exhaust that with fans through the roof. It is currently in moving forward with design, and we'll be putting that out to bid as soon as we have design for it. We don't have order of magnitude costs estimation for it just yet, but luckily the indication from the architect and engineer is that it's not massive to the point where you would need to consider not doing it. It's manageable. It's not small numbers, but it's not seven figures.
I think the message that I want to make sure the committee's understanding and those in attendance are understanding is that we're already moving forward with mitigation of these spaces at Stanley. It is in the design phase. It will be put out to bid. We can't give an exact date, but a lot of what I heard is that when are we addressing it? And we're here to say we are addressing it. We have to follow the proper steps with Max's leadership and following all the rules and regulations. It's in motion. So it's not like we were waiting and planned to not do anything. There is a plan. And I guess that's what I just want to emphasize.
So Max, I know that I'm putting you on the spot here, but obviously the big question is, so what's realistic? Is this like a 2-month project? Is this a year project? Like what is What can what can the students who are in those rooms expect?
I think, I don't know the answer, but I think that there's a range of what to expect. It's not going to be fixed. Let's put it this way. It's not going to be fixed by the end of this calendar year, okay? But it's also not going to impact the start of school in next September, okay? So it's somewhere in between that. And it's not fair for me to put any more exact of a date on it because I don't know, and I don't want to give false expectations. We're going to move it forward as fast as we can. I mean, we know that people want to get back into these rooms when and want these rooms to be safe. There's no debate about that, and we're moving the ball forward on that. And I know you probably want a little bit more clear of an answer, and the families want a more clear of an answer, but I don't have it, and I don't want to make it up.
So would it be, so in a worst case scenario, there's potential that we would not have students back in those 8 classrooms this year?
That would be the worst case scenario, yes. But I don't think, yeah, that's the worst case scenario.
Okay.
I also want to point out before we move on from this floor plan, something that Mr. Casper showed us is that in the larger space areas on these new floor plans, they have a maximum occupancy. So for example, the cafeteria at Stanley on the first floor has a maximum occupancy of 30. You'll see that on the floor plans. If we go back to Clark, their maximum occupancy in the multipurpose room was also 30. So there are some notations on these floor plans, but do you want to continue with Stanley Max?
Sure, and I'm glad you brought that up, Pam, because I do want people to take a look at the note for the maximum occupancies. We did treat these spaces a little bit differently with the mechanical engineer, because if you just look at the hard data on these spaces, it doesn't really give a good picture. It could tell you that you could put very, very large numbers in some spaces, and that's not the reality of the times we're living in. So we kind of worked with the mechanical engineer to put a safe number in these spaces based on all of the factors. That's a really important point. Yeah, we can work through, maybe go to the middle school. The Stanley's the same basically on the 2 floors.
Oh, there's a problem loading this page. Wait a minute. Let's see. I'm gonna go back.
Hey, while that's being loaded, hey Max, is it fair to say that if COVID weren't happening and we were in these 8 classrooms at Stanley, for example, that they're safe? I mean, they were safe pre-COVID because when we do air quality measures or whatever, they were fine for the occupancy, and it's because of COVID, because we have these like higher metrics for measuring airflow, that it's making this problematic, right?
Yeah, that's for the most part correct, Suzanne. I mean, the project that we're going to do at Stanley, we would have wanted to do that regardless. The ventilation in that section of the building was not and is not ideal, but you're hitting on a really important point, and that is that we're applying a standard, a 2020 engineering standard to buildings that were built in 1900, 1950s,
right,
1979 at the most recent, right? So we're applying that heightened standard because of the situation we're in right now, and we want to just be super safe. There's not a mandate under the code that you meet today's standards in old buildings, right? So you don't want to put people in spaces together that are totally unventilated, although that does happen. But our goal is for that to not be the case. But I think it summarizes it to say the standards that we're applying today during a pandemic aren't the same as we will after or did before. And we do need to make note of that. Yes.
I think I just want to, we heard a lot at town meeting about people complaining about these classrooms and how hot they are and how bad the ventilation is. And I think, like you said, that we don't have air mechanical systems in this building, like no wonder, right? And it's not because we haven't been maintaining them or whatever, it's because we don't have them. I think that's important that now we're being forced to do it. Maybe we should have done it, but it's just, I mean, it's like, this is like another silver lining, like we're finally dealing with something probably, right? But it's just interesting that this building is so old and that sort of hasn't been a priority to even like understand what the ventilation was like here before, because it wasn't a problem. I mean, it was hot in the this end of the summer and the end of the spring or whatever, but we didn't deal with it in the same way because the air quality tested fine.
And it's not an unusual phenomenon. I think what I suspect happened at Stanley is they had a very old building that was built at a time when fuel wasn't a major concern, and it was very inefficient. And what they likely did is they closed up ventilation at some point in time from an energy efficiency perspective. It's really interesting, actually, in both old and new buildings, that a lot of the things that we've been doing for energy efficiency, even in recent years at new buildings, we have temporarily gone the other way on. So even at the high school, where we used to command ventilation based on CO2 reactive to the occupants in the building, we are now overriding that and setting minimum airflow figures. And it relates interestingly to what likely happened at Stanley. And actually, there was an article in the item about the issues in a number of the old buildings in Lynn, where they have basically zero ventilation in a number of buildings because they on purpose closed it up at one point in time because of energy costs associated with operating old buildings. So
it's just interesting how we got here, but I think it also just speaks to obviously the age of these buildings and how many times they've been sort of patched and reconfigured and what the implications are. I mean, we see that right now, just building walls and dividing classrooms, how we're wrecking the ventilation in some of them, right? By like, putting a random wall up in the middle and blocking the window from one side of the room or something. It's
yeah, under ordinary circumstances, ventilation definitely doesn't always get the respect and
no longer.
Yeah, no longer. It's definitely at the forefront now, and that will be lasting. People aren't going to forget this. Ventilation is not going to be misunderstood, I don't think, as much going forward. And honestly, we're go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was going to ask Superintendent, what's happening at Stanley in the cafeteria and the teacher's room? What are those rooms being used for?
The teacher's room is being used as a classroom, and the cafeteria is being used into small breakout spaces. If you go in there are dividers and there are tables for all kinds of services within there. So both rooms are being fully utilized.
So the things that used to be happening out in the hallway are basically happening in the.
No, the things that used to be happening in small offices are now being moved down to larger spaces.
Okay.
So, for example, if I come back up here, let me come up to.
The reason why I ask is, and I know that this is not my job, but I look at a maximum occupancy of 30 and think, okay, is that a possibility to put 2 classrooms in there?
So, for example, I can tell you this, having been at Stanley for quite a number of years, these rooms right here that are orange on the second floor are being used. Those might be the services that are down in the cafeteria right now, because this will say avoid use for in-person learning, reserved for office space. So if they were servicing students in these small group rooms, they are now down in the cafeteria. Max, did you want me to go to Hadley next? Because that happens to be, did you want to go to Hadley or go straight to the middle school?
So Superintendent, before we jump off, I just actually had one more question on Stanley. So Max had said that the cost was not going to be massive. And I'm just wondering, and maybe this is just a refresher, but is there a plan in place to pay for this upgrade that you've talked about here?
I can speak to that a little bit, John, because I've had this conversation with Martha in the business office, and she has been planning with other town staff to look at our different options, and they're definitely making plans to pay for this. I can't speak to the specific
Martha's
plan,
hand
but
is
it's
up.
not.
Martha's hand is up if she wants to speak to it.
Martha,
Sure,
go ahead.
I'll address this one for you, Max. Mrs. Marshall and I did attend a combined Finance Committee and Capital Improvement Committee meeting in late October, and this topic did come up at that meeting. The design work that Max and I have addressed and are getting ready to move forward on with the PO, the operating budget can absorb that. It's not that significant that we can't absorb that. The actual construction costs, when that goes out to bid, and that's the big unknown right now that Mr. Casper is talking about. Once we get that bid back, we'll be in a better position to talk to Finance Committee and Capital Improvement to see if that's something that they want to fund out of their, they referenced it last night, and now forgive me, I'm not going to use the right phrase.
Their reserve fund, or
thank you. Yes, whether they can absorb it out of their reserve fund, or whether we need to put a warrant article on the town meeting, or whether it, how to address that need. So I think until we go out to bid with the construction documents and get actual bids and know what the true cost is, we have had some preliminary conversations about funding mechanisms, and there certainly are some out there. The only mechanism that right now was not available to us, and I know it was mentioned last night, is the CARES money. The CARES money, the CARES Act money was not for capital improvements, period. And that money expires on December 30th anyways, and the project would have had to have been completed by then, but it wouldn't have been able to have been funded through that regardless. So
Martha, do we have a commitment that this is not, these are not funds and questions, that it's just a question of figuring out where they'll come from, but they will come?
I think there was a genuine consensus to that. I mean, I don't have anything in writing, and I wouldn't want to misspeak for anyone on the finance or capital committees, but I guess after the meeting at town meeting last night, Mrs. Marshall can speak to it as well. I think there's a commitment to get Stanley back online and resolve the issues. We don't expect it to be a price tag that comes with 7 figures to it. It should be 6, but it won't be 7. So
I agree.
Marshall, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think there was a general consensus that they understood that this was coming, and that they were prepared for that. And that's coming from Capital and FinCom in the discussions that we had. Again, I don't want to speak for anybody specifically, but those conversations, it seemed well understood.
Max, did you want to go to Hadley or middle school next?
We can go right to the middle school. I'm not gonna, unless there's any specific questions at a particular building, I'm not gonna work through each and every space. So are there any questions about Hadley or even about the middle school?
I mean, you can see the keys, you can see the large space occupancies. This is where we talked about, as a leadership team, our administrators going back and really analyzing the spaces now for capacity and seeing whether we can expand some of those capacities. If you recall, I mean, this stands out for me. This is the band room before, and that wasn't usable, and now there is a maximum occupancy of 12, correct, Max? So, I'm sure, I shouldn't say I'm sure, the committee did receive in the previous meeting way back, the initial 4 plans, and I did print those out, and compared them to these, and you can see the changes. I think the most important takeaway is these purple spaces and the fact that Max has repeatedly taught us that air purifiers are not a replacement for ventilation. They are a second layer, and that the best ventilation that we can have on top of our mechanicals is a window or two cracked at 6 inches. And then the next layer is to add an air purifier to some of these spaces. But that kind of sums it up in my educational brain in terms of what these mean.
And I think, you know, just looking at this slide right here, it's really encouraging, this information. Look at all of those green spaces and just a couple of purple smattered in there and some orange. It's really good news, and purple aren't bad news. I mean, the purpose of what we've been doing is to identify issues as well as verify that things are good. So I don't look at the purples as a failure. I look at them as a success, as it helps us target certain areas to continue making all of these spaces better. We've been making spaces better over the course of this entire project, and we're going to continue. And we've been raising our level of understanding about what we have through the course of this as well. So I really want to stress that I know that the purple spaces can create a little bit of anxiety for the occupants or the people in the building in general, but they're just, it's really not a failure. It's really the point of what we're doing so that we can take the best next steps from here.
Max, how are we treating the art room at Stanley? It's a yellow.
Yeah, the art room at Stanley, I suspect, so right now we're treating the art room at Stanley as coded as minor ventilation issues that are not operable at this time, and we're not recommending it for use as a classroom. I suspect we'll be able to work through that equipment with our current repairs that are happening. The unit in there was frankly a little bit of a mess. It wasn't something we could just, you know, tweak some things and even get operable pretty quickly. It was one of the worst of the unit ventilators that we were dealing with, and that's why that has stayed as there's really not a lot of yellow left in the reports you'll see, but this one just we couldn't justify kind of giving it days of attention. It's not a major type of repair, and I suspect it will be improved over the coming months.
Well, and for those on this meeting that don't know, that art room is an old locker room that still has shower stalls in it. So is it a surprise that it's still yellow? No. You know, there's a drain that backed up in the middle of an art class way back in the day when I was there, and Amy had students, children there. So it is a locker room in the.
It's in a basement, right? It's
in the basement. With shower stall still there, with this kiln shoved in the corner.
It's in the shower stall.
It's not a surprise. One of the things that Max hasn't highlighted, and I tried to say last night, and I think it's important enough to say again, there have been contractors in our buildings 7 days a week. And I think, Max, you said as of Saturday, the next round of repairs or mitigations are occurring on the second shift in our buildings so that there's not students there. But I've been in on Saturdays, there are people there. I've been in on Sundays, there are plumbers running around. Things are going on. So it's not like, you know, these reports were done and nothing has happened. I think it's important for the community to understand ongoing work is occurring.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Max.
No problem.
School committee members? Oh, sorry. No, Max, you go.
I'm through. If there's any additional questions on the report or anything related to facilities, I'm happy to entertain that.
School committee members, feel free to speak up.
I just want to say thanks, Max. I feel relief that you're on the job. It's like so nice to see a thorough report and to understand that things are happening and that there's someone that has a really thorough understanding of what's going on and how to mitigate stuff and keep us moving forward. So thank you.
I want to chime into that. When at the beginning of my tenure here on school committee, we had the superintendent dealing with a roof that had blown off of Hadley. And despite all of your education in education, facilities is not something that the superintendent should be trying to figure out. So knowing that you are taking care of this, Max, is to Suzanne's point, is a huge relief to see that there are things happening and happening consistently, and that it has nothing to do with the superintendent's daily cares. So I thank you for that.
I also want to shout out to the general government side of things. Let's not forget that Max's position is a joint position between the general government and school department, and the generosity of our town administrator and letting Max really focus on the schools. And because this is a full-time job, and Max's time has been, 100% of it has been spent with us. And so I think it's important to recognize the generosity of the general government and allowing Max to focus all his energy and time on our school buildings. It is a shared position, and I just want to say thank you to the town side of things for allowing us to have him so solidly.
So will you report back to us in the next, I don't know, what would it be, month, when we hear from the RFPs, or what are the next steps?
So you're talking about the Stanley project, Amy?
Yeah.
That would be fine. I think when we get a little bit more clarity as to what the exact scope and price tag on that project is, it would probably be helpful to report back at that time with also maybe a little bit more clear plan for what the funding will be. That I don't know. I don't think we can set a date certain for when that would be the best time to report, but when we have that information sort of congealed, that would make sense to touch base, I think.
I guess even if it doesn't coincide with when we're meeting, if that just goes to the superintendent
of course,
reporting to us would be good. Anybody else on school committee?
I agree with what everybody else said. It was very thorough. Thank you.
So my question then about the facilities is not really for Max, but then superintendent, for you and your team, which is the question that everybody wants to know, which is what about those classes that were in Stanley that are now at the high school in the gym? And has your team begun to sort of investigate a worst case scenario that if, for example, we don't get back into the building this year, or this school year, what happens to those classes? Like where do our kids learn? Are there places around the district? Is it, as I know there's nothing easy about putting in portables, but what do we do?
Well, I think the sense I got last night and the night before at town meeting is that there was in some way a message that this was temporary and this was short term. And I don't think I've ever said that. I think that this was a solution for the time for right now, and how long that right now is, we don't know. I knew that we had to get through what we've gotten through in terms of looking at all of the mechanicals. So I don't think I've ever put a time frame on how long that will be. It's my hope that it is not this full school year, but if that's the time that it takes to mitigate those spaces in a proper manner, then I think we have to look at this. And I don't think the families will look at it this way, but I think the kids would, that this is an adventure. To say that a year of their elementary schools was taught at a high school, we have a busing situation to support families. We're talking about maxing out our spaces and utilizing our large spaces. There's classes being taught in the cafeteria at the middle school. There's classes being taught in the gymnasium at the middle school. So I don't have other spaces outside of portables. But when we go down that portable path, we're also talking about utilities. We're talking about, the plumbing, the heating, the cooling. Where are they going to be located? I don't know that, and Max and I have talked about this with Martha Seibert. I don't think getting portables is going to happen any quicker than the mitigation of this project. Is that fair to say, Max?
Yeah, I think it is fair, Pam, especially where we don't necessarily know the timeline on the repair yet. And I think it's important to emphasize that portables don't just show up tomorrow and we open them up. And there's a lot of planning and a lot of funding and a lot of other things that go into that. And at this point in time, our best course is figure out the Stanley building. And if there's a wrench thrown in that and we need to pivot, I mean, we're flexible. We've been flexible on a number of fronts for a while now, and we're just trying to make the best decisions. And at this point in time, the best path forward is push forward with the Stanley repairs.
So Superintendent, yes, I know that when you and your team first moved the students into the high school gymnasium, that it was for right now, and for not knowing how long right now is, but with the advent of sports, I'm assuming that our students' classrooms are going to take priority.
I would hope so. I mean, when I think about the fact that they're actually in a new building in a well-ventilated space, is that so wrong? Martha Seibert has her hand up because Martha, Max, and I have talked about this portable route and the challenges if we couldn't mitigate the spaces, the cost and the challenges and the timeline of getting portables up and running for those classrooms. But Martha, I'll let you chime in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Superintendent. In my career in Reading, we installed 6 classrooms, so 3 portable buildings at 3 different elementary schools. First step is to secure the capital, because these are $1 million purchases. This is not something that we would be able to just purchase. So securing the capital at a town meeting, which I would think you would need a town meeting vote to get that type of capital. From start to finish, it was a 7.5, 8 month process. It's getting the land ready. It's getting the pilings in. It's pulling the utilities. It's pulling the plumbing. So it's not like Mr. Casper said, they don't just appear. I mean, certainly we accelerated. I want to say the true construction happened from May and occupancy happened in early September. But they weren't ready to be opened the first week when school started. And those kindergartners did start school in the gym the same way we have kids in a gym now. That's not unusual to use a gym as a swing space while you're waiting for something else to open. So, but portables, certainly they're an option, but they're a very expensive option, and where we would put them and how we would secure the money and who would oversee it. I mean, something that large, you'd be hiring an OPM to oversee for you. So there's a whole process for even selecting an OPM.
But we also talked about the timeline of, we're already in design phase of this, the timeline of repairs, of the repairs versus going the route of the portables just didn't make sense. So I know that families are concerned and want to get their students out of the high school gym, but I would say again, it's a great space with great ventilation, and it's an adventure for kids. Now, do I want to do this more than, potentially a few more months? No. Do I want to do it next year? Absolutely not. But I think we're on the right path with a solution to our issues at Stanley in those classrooms.
I would also like to piggyback that these classes at Stanley are not split up. It's the entire class together for those 2 days. It's not an A and B cohort. It's an A cohort for one entire 3rd grade class, and the B cohort is the other entire 3rd grade class. So these kids are actually getting an experience that no other class in our district is getting right now. Their entire class is together in person.
They're working with 2 teachers, 3 teachers?
No, the one teacher is there with her class on Monday and Tuesday, and the other teacher is there with her class on Thursday and Friday. I believe I'm correct.
So when they come in, they're not coming in as cohorts. Sorry, I didn't understand. They're not coming in as cohorts. They're coming in as their whole class.
Yeah.
Oh. Wow. Geez, there's some positive to that. Suzanne, you looked like you had something to say. Am I putting you on the spot?
No, it got answered. Thank you.
I'm looking at you guys on school committee. Any more questions?
No, I'm good. I mean, it sounds like what I'm hearing is it's the same answer for the project. Worst case, the rest of the year, maybe not, but it's the same thing for those kids probably being in the gym. It's tied to that project.
Superintendent, who are the teachers who are teaching in that gym?
We have Mr. Gerasi and Miss Stevens, and I'm thinking of the other side. Help me out. Mrs. Raymond, do you remember the other teachers?
Miss Kelly and there's a new 4th grade.
Oh,
Mr. O'Donnell.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, he's not new, but he moved. There was some switching around this year.
yeah, they've changed grade levels, which is why I paused for a moment.
I know that there's been some switches over there.
I don't know if it might help maybe for people to see the space. It actually is pretty nice. And
yeah, can I revisit that? Because I offered to give school committee tours of the buildings, and I really rather not interrupt a principal's day to give the tours of the buildings. So that's something I'd like you to coordinate through me. If Mrs. Marshall and Mrs. O'Connor, you want to see the high school, I offered that a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
I'd be happy, because I don't think you should just see the high school. I think you should see the space, particularly that the 3rd and 4th graders are working in. But I would prefer to lead that as to not interrupt the administrators' days.
That's perfect.
That's fine.
I think also maybe it would be helpful to take a little video or some still photos just to show here at this meeting too, because I think parents or just people might be interested in seeing that. And I think
I've already taken photos, so it wouldn't be a problem to pop them on the screen. I did tweet them out. I know not everybody follows me on Twitter.
I saw
but I that was early on, and we can take more pictures, we can take more videos. There's small group instruction going on down along the sides. So I'd be more than happy to give tours of the building. I do think it's impressive to see the stickers and the signage and all of that stuff. So I think let's coordinate schedules and make that happen.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, Max, we look forward to welcoming you back. I think, obviously this has been a high priority for you and the superintendent, but it's nice to hear about all of these details in public. So thank you.
You'd be very welcome. No problem at all.
Thanks, Max.
So I don't have an update. We have a tri-chair meeting on Friday.
I do have an update that I'll be updating at the tri-chair. We are actually interviewing for directors of human resources on Friday following the tri-chair meeting. So we have those interviews coming up jointly with the town administrator that morning. So we do have some interviews.
Good. Okay. So with that, then I'm going to move on to the consent agenda unless anybody wants to add anything. The consent agenda is designed to expedite the handling of routine and miscellaneous business of the district. The school committee can adopt the entire consent agenda with one motion, and at the request of any committee member, any items can be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda for discussion. Tonight, we have 3 things. We have a regular session minute from November 4th. We have a donation from the Weatherspoon Charitable Foundation to the Drama Club and Green Scholars Program. And we have a warrant, but I do not have any details on that. So I'm not, was that given to you? Did you sign that?
I have not.
So I'm gonna pull that warrant off since I don't have any details about it.
Okay.
Martha, do you?
Are you talking about the Weatherspoon?
No, the warrant, number C.
Oh, okay.
Number C.
You know what, Claire, Mrs. Gorman usually handles that with Mrs. Karen, so I'm not sure what warrant number, how that got missed on the agenda, so I don't want to
Okay.
speculate which warrant it is. It's probably 20-18, but I'm not sure. So I apologize, I
okay.
didn't catch it. That
So
the warrant.
is it okay by you if we approve that at the next school committee meeting? Okay.
Yes.
So then the consent agenda is for two things: the regular session minutes on November 4th and the donation from the Weatherspoon Charitable Foundation Scholars Program. And I presuming that everybody has had a chance to look at a very generous gift. And I will entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
Okay, then all in favor, roll call vote. Karen?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion is approved. Motion passes. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Can I have a second? All in favor, roll call vote. John?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Karen? And I am a yes. So we are adjourned at 8:57 on Wednesday, November 18th.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.